Alright, so the first thing I want to do is select that top one, and we need to start changing some properties. So the first thing, of course, is the text color for both of these is white, and the hex is FFF, and we might as well do the same thing for the bottom, FFF, enter. Alright, so now both for our text fields are white. Now another thing I want to do is I actually want to change the width of these. So you see how the size of this text field is pretty much matches whatever text is inside. Well, that's kind of annoying me, even though it really won't be a problem. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the layout width for this text to match parent. So I'm going to put match parent, and as you can see, now we can have the text field pretty much span the entire fragment. We're going to do that for both. Layout width, match parent, and of course the only other problem we get for this is now it's on the left. And of course, if you like I don't know, having your text on the left, you can leave it that way, but typically meme text is right in the center. So I'm going to switch back to that first one. I'm going to set gravity to center horizontal and center horizontal as well. Now what I actually want to do is, again, for this app, what's going to happen is the user is going to type in their own text, and it's going to pretty much set this text to whatever they typed in, but I just want to change the default text of it because large text looks kind of weird. So for the default text, I'm just going to name this one like top text and this one bottom text. Actually, let's just name it top and bottom. The user, of course, knows that it is text already. Alright, simple enough. So, of course, just so I don't have to look at these stupid little warnings, change this extract string resource, and for the top, I'm just going to call this one top text, even though we never actually use these through our Java code at least. And for the bottom one, where you at, light bulb? There you are. And we will just call the bottom text bottom underscore text and hit OK. So again, I know it looks kind of weird right now, kind of stretched out and kind of goofy looking. However, whenever we take this fragment and add it to our activity and everything is said and done, it's actually going to look really nice. So for now, the only other thing we have to do is remember, there's two parts to every fragment: the design of it, which we took care of already, and the Java file, the class. Alright, so creating the class for this is going to take like 2.5 seconds. So right click the package just like you created the class for the other one, new Java class. Of course, I'm going to name this class bottom picture fragment. Alright, it looks good. And now what we can actually do, instead of typing everything again, is just go to, actually let me arrange this a little bit better. Alright, so go to all that stuff we typed out in, I don't know, like 2 tutorials ago or whatever, and paste in all of those imports. And again, remember I said the 2 rules that we have to follow is we first need to inherit from that fragment class, so extends fragment, and the second rule was we need to override on create view. And we already typed all this code, so no need to type it again. Alright, so the one thing that we actually do have to change is this. Remember, on create view is where we tell it what design or what XML file we're using. So right now, we're saying, okay, we want to use the top section for this and the top section for this. Well, for that new fragment that we just created, we actually want to use the bottom picture. So if you go to this little bit of code, you can type bottom picture fragment. So now you have 2 fragment classes. The first one is made to use this, and the bottom one is using this. So now we have 2 fragments created perfectly. The only other thing we have to do now is add these fragments to the activity. So go to your activity main XML file, and first of all, delete this stupid default text view. I wish they didn't even include that. But to add a fragment to your main activities design, what you do is you scroll down all the way at the bottom, and under the custom folder you're going to see this little thing called fragment. So this means, okay, we want to add a fragment to this design, and of course this is your main activity, your main screen. So click this, and let's just go ahead and add the top one first. So click top section fragment, which is that fragment we just created, and hit OK. So from here it says, where do you want to place that fragment? Well, let's just go ahead and plop it in the very top center. And now it says, okay, you have a little issue. I don't know what I want your fragment to look like, and I really don't know why this pops up. I think it's going to be fixed in the future tutorials, but if you just click this right here, it says use this one, then it says, okay, that's what I'm using. That's what, I don't know, this fragment's going to look like. So now, once we have that taken care of, the only other thing we have to do is add that bottom fragment. This one right here. So go back to your activity main layout and pretty much do the same exact thing. So click fragment, choose bottom picture fragment, choose OK, and stick it in the bottom center. Now it says OK. I don't know what your layout's supposed to look like. Just click this link, and it says use that XML file, and sweet. Now I told you guys that since this is actually a fragment and not an entire activity, what we can do is we can change the size of this. So highlight fragment 2, which is that bottom fragment, and if you go to layout, actually you can change both of these. So layout width right now is wrap content, which means however big your contents are, just fit it to that size. But what we actually want to do is we want to give it a fixed height and width, and we want to make it square. So I'm just going to type like 275 dp and hit enter. So that's the width, and actually let me just copy that. Now for the height, 275 dp, since I want this to be square, and hit enter again. Now since it's positioned at the bottom center, that's where it's going to reside. And actually that's kind of small, and I have a little bit of space, so I'm going to change this to 300. Actually, let me change the height first. Can we go bigger? I think we can go 320. 320. Can you do it without, oh yeah, looking sweet, looking sweet. Oh my god, I feel like I want to eat. Now drop the beat. Alright, so that is pretty much how we arrange our main activity. So right now, again, this entire thing is our main activity, but it's consisting of two different fragments: the top section fragment and the bottom picture fragment. Pretty sweet. Alright guys, now that we are finally done designing everything, what we can do is we can start adding the brains to our program. Now, before we get started with any of that, you guys need to follow these rules. First rule of Fragment Club: fragments do not talk directly to one another. Second rule of Fragment Club: fragments do not talk directly to one another. Okay, you got that? These fragments are never going to communicate directly to one another. So what's going to happen is, since we need to take this text that the user types in and apply it to this fragment, they need some sort of medium, someone to go through, and that medium is the main activity. So what's going to happen whenever the user types in text and presses this button is it's going to say, hey yo, activity. The user just clicked my button, and the activity is going to say, okay, let me get that text. Cool, got it. Hey yo, yeah, I'm activity. Yeah, bottom fragment, I'm going to need you to change your text to whatever I tell you to. So that's pretty much what's going to happen. This fragment, or this button rather, is going to wait to be clicked, and when it gets clicked, it's going to tell the activity about it, and then the activity is going to tell this fragment about it. So again, remember those rules. Fragments are never ever allowed to talk directly to one another. Sweet. So let's go ahead and first set up the listener for this button click. So in top section fragment right there, let's go ahead and import 3 more things. Of course, we need to import android.app.activity, and this is just so it can talk to that main activity. Now the next thing we need to do is just import android.widget.button, because remember it has a button right there, and we also need to import the package for these edit text fields because it has edit text fields. Simple stuff. So import android.widget.edit text. Alright, looking good. So of course, before we actually start adding the brains to anything, we just need to get a reference to all of this stuff. So top text input, bottom text input, and the button. So I'm going to make a private variable static edit text, and that first one, actually let me name my variables the same. Alright, so top text input and bottom text input. So top text input, and I'm just going to copy this because I am lazy, and bottom text input. Alright, pretty sweet, very nice, very nice. Alright, so now on create view, and the reason that I'm going to stick it in here is because this gets called as soon as pretty much this view is created, as soon as this fragment is created. So of course that's when I'm going to assign all the variables, because you know it's like the perfect time to. So for this top text input, just set this equal to, we're going to cast it into edit text. Again, we've done this like a million times by now. View find by ID, and the ID of this is r.id.top text input, and then it's probably just faster if I just edit text view find by ID r.id.bottom text input. Where are you at? There you are. And the last thing we need to do is actually get a reference to that button. So button, I'll just name it, what did I name it? I think I just named it button. Alright, so this equals, of course, it's going to be typecasted into a button. View dot find by ID r.id.button button. Alright, so now we got a reference to everything. Pretty boring, nothing really to explain there. Alright, so what we need to do now is we need to set up a listener on that button. So this button is pretty much just going to be chilling there waiting for something to happen. So for button, let me add my stupid lines again. And I actually want to give myself a little bit more room. I like when I can like scroll around for some reason. And let me make sure you guys can see that source code in case you are copying it. So button, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set on click listener. And again, we did this in the last couple tutorials. So what we need to do is we need to put new view dot on click listener. And the only method that we need to have here is public void on click, pass in that view. Alright, so inside this method is essentially where we write what do we want to happen when the button gets clicked. Well, instead of jamming up inside here with a bunch of code, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new method called button clicked, and I'm just going to pass through that view v. So that way, if we go outside this on create view, then I can make public void button clicked, and of course it takes that view parameter that we just passed through. So essentially any code that gets called whenever this button gets clicked, I can just type in here, and it's a little bit neater. Let me just tighten that up for now because we're actually going to be filling this in just a bit. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial what I'm going to be doing is I'm essentially going to be gluing together this top fragment with this main activity. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to communicate That was kind of cute little burp there. All right. I always try to compliment my burps as best I can. All right. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how to successfully communicate between this top fragment and the main activity. And again, it may look a little bit weird whenever I'm doing it, but I promise by the end of this tutorial, once you see how everything is put together, it's going to make sense. So again, if you're watching this tutorial, don't give up halfway through, because at the end, it's going to make a lot of sense. So the first thing we're going to do is we actually are going to create an interface, and you'll understand why later. So I'm just going to name my top section listener. Activity commander is the name of the interface object. And of course, since we said, okay, we're going to create an interface named top section listener, let's go ahead and do that right now. So public interface top section listener, and of course what we need to do is we need to say, okay, this interface that's going to be implemented by main activity, you're going to implement it to ensure that you have some function, or excuse me, I'm used to programming PHP. I've been working on my site, so that's why I may call some things functions, but it ensures that you have this method implemented. So this method that we want to make sure that main activity implements is create meme. Now for create meme, whenever main activity is trying to create meme, and again, this is just a method that we're going to be making later, but we're going to pass it in two strings, the top and the bottom. So again, what's going to happen is this main activity is going to implement this interface, and whenever it does, it says, okay, I promise that I'm gonna use this method called create meme, and what create meme essentially is going to do is we're going to pass it in the text from here and the text from here, and then it's going to use that to create the bottom meme. Alright, so what we have to do after this is actually have an override method, and the override method is on attach, and hit OK. So what on attach does is it gets called whenever we attach the fragment to the activity. So whenever that happens, what code do we want to stick in here? Well, all we want to have is we want to say, okay, try that activity commander and set this equal to top section listener activity. And let me just finish this up and then I'll explain what I'm doing. So after this, what I want to do is just catch class exception. I'll just call it E, and if I catch that, hopefully I won't, throw new class cast exception activity, and I'll just have toString, so we have something nice to look at, or hopefully we don't look at it. Alright, so actually I might as well just finish up all this code and then I'll talk you guys through it. So on button clicked, and I added a little comment so you guys know what's going on. So this eventually gets called whenever the user clicks the button. Remember, we just stuck it down here to make it nice and neat. And inside here, for that activity commander thing, which what the heck is that? You're going to call create meme. And remember, create meme is pretty much how we communicate to this main activity. So whenever we're communicating with it, we're going to give it two pieces of data to pass along to bottom picture fragment. And those two pieces of data are the text that the user typed in here and in here. So how do we get that text? Well, the two parameters are top text input, and to get the text from an edit text, it's just a method get text and convert it to a string, which pretty much means just the text itself. So the first parameter is the top text that they typed in, and the second parameter is the bottom text. So same exact thing essentially. So toString. Alright, so let's go ahead and step back and essentially see what the heck just happened. So what's going to happen is we're saying whenever you want to talk to top section fragment, in order to do that, you need to implement this interface right here. So later on, we're going to implement it from main activity. Now, whenever we implement this interface that we just created, what main activity is doing is it's saying, okay, I implemented it, so I promise that I'm going to create this method called create meme. Now, we need to ensure that this method gets created, because if we're trying to talk to main activity and pass along that information and they don't have a method called create meme, well, that's going to cause a whole bunch of trouble. So saying, okay, whenever I attach this fragment on main activity, then I'm going to create that interface, which we just did. Actually, right here is where we created it. And then since I created this, I'm going to include this method, and eventually whenever they click the button, they're going to go to main activity and call the create meme method with these two pieces of information. So I know it's kind of weird, but that is how top section and main activity talk to one another. And if you made it through this tutorial, I promise everything else is actually really easy. So that was the hardest part. So if you don't understand, then, well, you probably will by the end of this tutorial. It's probably going to be like 2 more videos, maybe even 1. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Alrighty guys, so the hard part is over. Now let's just go ahead and do the easy stuff. So in my main activity, what we're going to be doing is, remember, implements and top section fragment dot top section listener. Sweet. So again, I already explained what all that does, and our promise that we made to top section fragment is, okay, I promised that I was gonna have this create meme that you can talk to. So let's go ahead and hit Alt Insert and implement that method create meme. Actually, let me add a little comment right here. So I'll put this gets called by the top fragment when the user clicks the button. So now you know when this gets called. There you go. Now before we actually start adding any code to here, and this is actually really simple, it takes like 2 lines of code. What we need to do is we need to have a method in this bottom picture fragment, and all this method is going to do is, let me just go to my activity main. So this is actually going to be really easy. It's not even any weird communication stuff. It's just normal Java. We're just going to get a reference to both of these text elements, and then we're going to set the text of them to whatever gets passed in. Simple, easy weasy stuff. Alright, so under view group, of course, we need to import one thing, android.widget.textView. And both of those things are text view, so that's why we only need to import one thing. Now, of course, we need to reference both of them, so static text view, and I don't think I actually, so it's in bottom picture. Alright, text view. Alright, so I didn't give them an ID. Should I? Yeah, I probably should. Alright, so where you at? Alright. So for the top text view, let's just go ahead and give it an ID of, instead of text view, I'll just put top meme text, and for the bottom one, I'll give it a text view of bottom meme text. Alright, so now they have IDs that are a little more proper. So private static text view, top meme text, and private static text view, bottom meme text. By the way, it's Christmas Eve, so happy Christmas Eve. Or, I don't know, you don't say happy Merry Christmas Eve? I don't know what you say. Just never mind. You know what? Just forget about it. Alright, so now that we have variables that can actually accept a reference, let's go ahead and create those references right now. So top meme text, we already know how to do this. Cast that bad boy to a text view, and view dot find by ID r dot id dot la la la, where you at, top text. That's actually not it. Top meme text. Now for bottom meme text, set this equal to view dot find blah, 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 r dot id dot bottom meme text. So again, both of these variables right here reference this bit of text and this bit of text. Easy enough. So now the only other thing we have to do is we need to create one last method, public void set meme text. Now what this is going to do is it's going to take two parameters, string top and string bottom, and it's going to set these text fields equal to whatever we pass in. So top meme text set text equal to top, and what was our other one? Bottom meme text set text equal to whatever we passed in for the bottom. And that is actually all we have to do. So again, just to recap one last time, we imported this so we could actually use those things. And once we did, we could create a reference to that top and bottom text. And why did we need a reference to them? Well, since we can then programmatically change the text of both of those widgets. So thank you guys for watching, and in the next tutorial we're going to be finishing this up and running it, and hopefully it'll work. So the only thing we have to do is, of course, 2 lines of code. Probably going to be the easiest tutorial in the world. Get a reference to that bottom fragment, and of course call set meme text on it. So let's go ahead and get a reference first. So bottom picture fragment, I'll just name it bottom fragment, and you set it equal to, and this is a lot like getting a reference to any other widget. It just is a little bit weird because it's a fragment. So bottom picture fragment, of course, and the method is get support fragment manager, and then you need to find fragment by ID, and of course, since it's a resource ID, and fragment 2, I believe it was. Alright, so the fragment regular is the top one and fragment 2 is the bottom one. So now that we have a reference to that bottom fragment, what we can do is we can actually bottom fragment, and that was set meme text. Now we just have to pass in top and bottom, which is what the user typed in. It's now getting passed along to that bottom fragment, and hopefully, if everything works, it should take the text from here, pass it to the activity, and what method we just wrote, it will change the text on there. So let's just go ahead and run this. Now let's just type something like as to wear glasses, can't see sharp, and let's thinkify this meme. So sweet. There you go, looking good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create the world's worst meme app. Alright guys, so let's start learning about master detail flow. And what this is pretty much a new kind of way to structure the entire design of your app. Because what it is essentially a way to add a real quick menu to your app, and the menu is actually displayed differently on tablets than it is phones, because phones don't really have that much area to use. So in like 2 seconds I'll be showing you guys a quick example, but for right now, start a new project, and I'll just name this like master flow, I don't know, that's good enough. So master flow, whatever. Alright, API 8 looking good. Next, and right here, instead of just adding a blank activity, scroll down to master detail flow, and this is a better little demonstration instead of me just trying to explain it. So this is what it would look like on a tablet if you're holding it sideways. Again, a list of items would always be shown on a menu on the left hand side, and whenever the user selected one of those things, then the content or whatever they were trying to view, it would appear on the right hand side. Now of course with the phone it's a little bit different, because if you always had a menu sticking on the left hand side, then you really couldn't see anything because there's not that much space. So on a phone what happens is you have a menu that kind of looks like this with a bunch of items, and the user can click one of those, and whenever they do, it transitions into just showing all the content on the full screen. And of course if they ever want to pull up the menu again, they can click back and go back to the menu. So again, a tablet always shows the menu on the left. A phone, you have to keep switching back and forth to it. Alright, so now that you know the basics of it, again select Master Detail Flow and hit Next. Ugh, got like phlegm in my throat. Actually, I'm chugging orange soda right now, so yeah, not bad, not bad. Alright, so the first thing we need to tell it is this. Alright Bucky, you're going to have a list of items that the user can choose from. What items are these? Well, for this example, what I'm going to do is, for the content, I'm just going to be displaying web pages because it's really easy to do. And I don't know, I just think it'll be a good demonstration. So for the object kind, I'll just write something like web page, and for the plural, I'll write web pages. And this, again, you can name it any noun that you want. This is just for naming conventions. It doesn't, you know, affect your code at all if you name it something weird. So name it like list items, web pages, again, books if you're displaying like different books they can choose from, whatever. But anyways, I'm gonna have web pages and click finish. Alright, looking good. So as you can see, what it did already is it created a bunch of different files for us, not just one Java class and one XML layout like before. It actually created 4, it looks like. Pretty sweet. And by default we have this one right here, and this web page detail fragment popped up for us. Now another thing I want to mention is, you don't have to click this, I just want to explain something. So this 2-pane layout would be for something like a tablet. This just looks kind of weird because I'm using a phone as my example, but this left section would of course be the list, and the right area, this is actually called the details pane. So if I just call it the main area or like the details area, it's all the same thing. So again, the list in the details pane. So I just didn't want you guys to get confused with my terminology. So the first thing I actually want you guys to do before you start working on the layout or anything is go in your app, Java, under your package, you're going to find a directory called dummy. Now what this dummy is, if you expand it, you're going to see that there's one Java file in it. So just go ahead and click that, and let me drag it to the left. And as you can see by the comments, it says this is just a helper class for pretty much creating really quick templates. Essentially what this is it's just an example class, and it has some sample menu items right now. So the list just says like item 1, item 2, item 3. And of course, you would never want to use this whenever you're making a real app. Again, it has like kind of bad naming conventions and everything, but just for understanding the basics of a master detail flow, it's really good for modifying and demonstrating. So open this file, dummycontent.java, and of course if you scroll down, you're going to see a class called dummy item right here. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be making a list of items. Now each of those items is going to be a dummy item object. So each list is an object. Now also, each item in the list is going to have a couple properties with it. These are the default properties, but I'm going to have our list have an ID, a name, and a URL for the web page. So we can keep ID, since of course every one of our list items is of course going to have an ID. And also want public string. I'll just name this like item name. just copy this. And the last thing we need is the URL, because whenever we click it, it needs to know what URL to display in the details pane, that main area. So after we created all our variables, the next thing I want to do is actually just change this little method right here. And what this is pretty much going to do is, well, I probably don't even need to explain it, but it's going to take whatever values we pass in and set it to the class variables. So I don't know, that's just normal Java stuff. So of course the ID is good. This item name, set it equal to whatever item name we pass in, and this URL, we have to set it equal to whatever URL we pass in, and of course we actually need to pass them in. Alright, looking good. Alright, so again, one last time, this class is going to be responsible for creating individual items in our list. So of course, these are the properties that each item is going to have, and right here, all we're doing is, I don't know, this just assigning the values to the variables. Normal stuff. And this last method right here, string to string, what I actually want to do is I want to return item name instead of the default content. So that's all we have to do as far as creating individual items. So now if we scroll back up, we're going to see that we got some errors right here. So again, for the example, whenever it was creating items, it just used two pieces of information, an ID and something else. I don't even remember what it was. But right now, our list items are going to have three properties: an ID, a name, and a URL. So of course, if we go up here, this add item is essentially just a method that creates a new dummy item object. And we already saw whenever we created a dummy item object, that was of course a list item. Simple enough. So of course it needs three properties that we need to pass in, and let me pull up. Alright, so this is what I'm gonna do. So the first one of course is the ID. We'll keep that 1, 2, and 3. The second one was the name, so I'll just name this one like Bucky, and this can just be a URL to my profile, if I can get my cursor in the right place. Alright, so the next one can be it will display the forum, and the last one will display the videos page. Alright, so what is the URL to my forum? That. And let's get the URL to the videos page. Again, use any three URLs you want. You don't have to use the same ones as I am. Alright, so again, what this bit of code does is it essentially creates three sample list items, and each list item has an ID associated with it, a name, and this name is just going to be the name that appears on the list, because displaying the URL will look, I don't know, kind of stupid. And the URL, of course, is so we can pass it in and it knows what to display. Alright guys, so once you got all your housekeeping code written in the dummy content.java file, we can actually hop over to the fragment webpage detail XML file, and we can start working on the interface or the design of it. Now remember what I told you guys this app is going to do is it's going to have a list, and the user is going to select from that list what web page they want to view, and in the main area right here, all it's going to do is display some web page. So the easy thing about this is that we don't actually need to have any widgets on here at all, like no text areas, no buttons, no sliders or anything. The only thing we need to do is somehow display a web page in here. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, delete every single thing that's in your XML file, and since this is the only thing in here, they won't just let you right click and delete it, so you actually need to go to your source code and delete all of this. So I'm going to pause my screen recorder right now and type all of the stuff that I need to type in, and then I'll explain it. So you guys don't need to watch me type it because it's going to take a few minutes. Alright, so what I did, of course, this is just housekeeping stuff, but the widget I added is this web view right here. And actually, if you go down, it's this one right here. Now what this web view is it's just an area or a widget that you can have that can display a web page. Easy enough. And also what I did is, I know you can't tell because it's not giving me those grid lines, but I set it to match parent both for the width and height, and that way it takes up the entire screen size. So whenever we display a web page in here, it's going to display on your entire screen and not just a small section of it. Now another thing that I don't want to forget is I actually want to change the ID of this to, I don't know, I'll just name it like details area. Actually, detail area, that might be better. Alright, now of course we need to do that because we need to reference it whenever we say, hey, this is the web page that you're supposed to display. So now we got all our list items created, and we have our interface set up with this web view thing that can display web pages. So how do we say, okay, this is the web page that we actually want you to display? Well, for the associated Java class for this fragment right here, and that's this one, web page detail fragment, and this is the one that opened by default, so as long as you didn't close it, if you did, it's right in here. Again, this is pretty much a controller for this area or this fragment. And the first thing that we of course need to do is we need to say, okay, you need to be able to work with that web view. So if you go to web, why aren't you popping up? Web view. Why did none of that pop up? It's weird. What's going on here? Okay. Suspicious, but we didn't get any errors right here, so should be good to go. Alright, so down here, what you're going to see is you're going to find this method called onCreateView. Basically, whenever you create this fragment, this is the code that I want you to run. Now by default, it's still set to that text view, and remember we deleted that text view and replaced it with a web view so we can see web pages. So delete this because we don't need it anymore, and instead pretty much change it to web view, and this is how you do that. So web view root view. Why is none of this crap popping up? It's kind of annoying me. Alright, I'll just type the hard way. Find view by ID r.id. What was the ID of that? Detail area. And of course, what this is essentially going to do is it's going to reference this right here, this entire web view or this entire section. So now once we have that reference, the only other thing that we need to do is we need to call load URL. And what this is going to do is of course take this web view and display a web page depending on whatever URL we pass in, and this M item is the list item, and this is actually like 90% of this is taken care of whenever we just click master detail view in the very beginning of this tutorial. So that's why like we don't need to make M item manually or anything. It's really easy. However, like I said, this M item is going to resemble one of these objects, whatever one the user tapped. And of course, since this load URL needs a URL, we're just calling the URL property on this. So why that didn't autocomplete kind of annoyed me, and actually we don't need this text view anymore, so we can delete that. So the last thing that we need to do, one more line of code, is we need to head over to the manifest right here, and again, what this is essentially the manager for your entire app. It glues everything together. Now since we're going to be using this web view right here, what this does, again, it displays a web page, and we're going to be connecting to the internet. Now anytime you do that in your manifest, you need to say, hey, I need to request permission for the internet. So I'm going to type uses. See, none of this is popping up. Uses permission Android name equals Android permission dot internet. Alright, so looking good. And if you ever go to like the Google Play Store and you're downloading apps, and right before you download it, it says this app needs like your location, access to the internet, and it says, and it pretty much asks you, is this okay? Can this app have access to like your camera and stuff? Well, this is how it gets all of those permissions right there. So pretty cool bit of information, and that's actually it. So now what we can do is run this bad boy and see if it works. Alright, so here we are. Again, this is going to look a little bit different on a tablet. This menu right here would constantly be stuck on the left hand side, but since this is a phone, we get the list on one screen and the content on another screen. So I'm just going to click Bucky, and it displays my profile. Pretty sweet, my beautiful face. And of course, if we ever want to go back to the list, then just click this button again, and now you can choose something else such as videos, and it will display that video page. Pretty stinking sweet. So again, that's the very basics of how do you create a master detail flow. I know a lot of people were wondering what that thing was whenever we chose blank activity as every like project setting. So now you understand. Hopefully you guys can make some pretty sweet menus now. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and well, I'll see you guys next time. Alrighty, Hosses, welcome back to another video, and let's go ahead and start learning how to create an overflow menu. Now, an overflow menu is that menu in the top right corner with the three little dots that you click, and it gives you some options. You guys have used them all before. You probably didn't know that it was called an overflow menu though. And if you don't have that toolbar at the top of your preview, then all you have to do is click this button right here and change the app theme to, I don't know, something like Hollow Light. That'll work. Actually, someone asked me how I got this icon right up here before. They actually asked me on my website. They thought like I loaded in an image or something, and all I did was just chose a new theme. And also Material Light, it's another good one. But as you can see, choose any of those and you're going to have that option to create an overflow menu in the top right corner with either three little dots or sometimes there are three little squares. So whenever you click this, a little menu is going to appear. And for this example, what I want to do is I'm just going to have three items that say, I don't know, colors like red, green, or yellow. I'll just pick three colors off the top of my head. And whenever you click one of those choices, it's going to change the background of your app to that color. So that's kind of the standard tutorial that everyone does whenever they're learning how to make these overflow menus. So I figured I might as well just stick with that. It's a really easy example. So the very first thing I want to do, of course, since this app is eventually going to be changing the background color, is we need a way to actually reference this. So let me just delete this first because it's annoying me. And if you guys want some text to look at, then I'll drop a large one in there. But that little one, I don't know. I just hate that little plain text view for some reason. Anyways, kind of losing focus right here. So we need a way to reference the background of this. Of course, we can just use the relative layout because the layout is essentially the entire layout right now. It's a pretty boring interface, but whatever. So we need to give an ID to this layout. So name it anything you want. I'm just going to name mine main view, hit enter, and then later on in our Java code we can reference it through the ID. Boom, simple enough. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and start actually creating the menu items. Now if you guys are like, oh, okay, this is going to be a pain, I'm going to have to like go in here probably and import some stuff and type this long crappy stupid thing. Actually, you are in luck because all of the functionality to create the overflow menu is built right in by default. Now if you go to your resources folder and go to this menu directory right here and expand it, double click this main menu.xml file. What this is the design for the overflow menu right here. Now by default it has one item in it, so we can just delete that. But actually before we do, I'll mention this. So of course your menu can have either one item, 5 items, however many you want. Now each item that you add is going to be referenced by a new tag. So you can add, one of these, then you would have one option, 5 of them, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to add like 3 or something, and I don't want this, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Give myself some room to work with. Now another thing I want to mention is this. There are different types of overflow menus, and actually you could see that whenever I deleted that item, the overflow menu deleted because there's nothing in it right now, but as soon as we add another item it'll display again. Anyways, the different types of overflow menus you can have are dependent on what you want to do. So if you're familiar with web design, you can create something like a toggle effect or radio buttons so that only one of the options that can be selected. And that's what I'm going to do in this tutorial. I'm going to create a group of 3 items, and the user can only select one, since the background can only be one color. So anytime you want to create this effect, what you do first is you need to take all of your items and add them under a single group. So group, and if you hit Android checkable behavior and hit single, what this does is it essentially says, okay, I'm going to be throwing a bunch of items in here, but the user can only check one of them. Cool, simple enough. So now let's go ahead and actually add those items. So item, and actually let me do it like this since we're going to be having a few attributes. So the first thing we need is an ID of each one, because that way we're going to associate each item with an ID and a color, and that way we can reference it so we know which color to use actually, and everything isn't just all messed up. So I'm just going to what can I give my... Alright, I'll just name it like menu red. That'll probably be the easiest. We actually only have to do this once, then I can just copy and paste it. Alright, so order and category. This is essentially the order of how you want them to appear. Show as action. Never want to do that, so I'm going to write never. And the last thing, you guys can probably guess what this is. The title is the text that you want to display, and of course we can either just type it in there like red, but it's proper to have a reference to a string, so I'm going to write string red string. And it's giving me an error because we didn't actually make that string in our XML file yet, but we will in just 1 second. Actually, I can do this, save myself some time. Alright, so now that we know how to create a menu item, let me just save us some time and just copy that, copy that, copy that. Alright, so the first one is red, the second one will just have like green, and this is the second list item, and of course our reference is that, and the third one would be, let's do yellow. And of course this is the third item, and yellow. So right now if we were to run this program, what would happen is, it's giving us, we already know what that is we would have an option menu whenever we clicked it, and a little menu would appear. However, whenever we selected one of those choices, nothing would happen. So we have the design taken care of, but we don't have any functionality. So before we can actually start working in the code, we need to fix these little errors right here. So open up your strings file and check it out. So what did I name those? So red string is that string reference, and the value is pretty much the text that's going to appear on that menu. So I'm just going to write red for the first one. What colors did I have? Green and yellow. green and yellow. Actually, whenever I was like a teenager and I used to answer the phone, I always said yellow instead of hello. So, you know, that's a pretty stupid stories. All right, so moving on. Um, all right, so now all of our errors, it's kind of a hard word for me to say, errors. Now all the error is taken care of. So let's head over to the main activity.java. The first thing we need to do, since we are indeed changing the background of this, is actually have the ability to reference it. So Android widget relative layout. So now we have access to the background essentially. Now, check this out. We actually don't even need to create any new methods right here, because if we scroll down, this method right here on options item selected, what this does is it calls this method automatically whenever you select an item from this menu right here. So if you guys didn't know what it did before, you do now. That is the purpose of it. And I hate when I don't have that extra space right there. So anyways, delete all these comments because comments are stupid. And we're going to add a little bit of code. We can actually delete everything from in here. Might as well just start brand new. So, alright, let me adjust so we know what's going on. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to get a reference to that background right here. So, relative layout, and what did I name it? Main underscore view, and set it equal to relative layout, find view by ID, and r.id.main view. By the way, if you watched my last tutorial, you saw that my autocomplete wasn't working. It is now working again, and I didn't do anything to change it. So I wasn't really sure why it stopped working, but it's working again, so, you know, hallelujah. Alright, so now we have a reference to the background. Now what we have to do is we need to say, okay, this method is obviously going to be called every time the user selects one of these options. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to test which item they selected. Was it either red, green, or yellow? And then we set the background to that color. So what I'm going to do is you can use a bunch of if statements if you want, but the easiest way is to actually use a switch statement. Now the item, and this is just what gets passed into us, so we didn't have to make our own variable or anything. So this is a list item, and what I want to do is I want to get the item ID. Now what this does is it returns, if I can show you, the ID right here. So either menu red, menu green if you selected the green, menu yellow if you selected the yellow. Simple enough. So now let's start coding the switch and some line numbers. Make it look good. Alright, so in the case that they select r.id.menu red, what do you want to happen? Well, the first thing I want to do is this. If that list item is already checked, and actually since I'm only going to be writing one line, I don't need to include brackets or anything, but item set check equal to false. Else item set checked equal to true. Now after this, and pretty much the main meat of this, is you take that main view and you set the background color to, in this case it would be color.red. Now of course, since this is inside a function, we eventually need to return something, so we're just going to return true to let it know that we handled that event. And the cool thing about this is we can just copy it and paste it 2 more times. Alright, so the first one was for red, the second one was green, I think. So we need to change the background to green. And the third one was yellow. Yellow? Alright. So essentially what this is going to do is this method is going to be called, again, every time the user selects one of the options from that overflow menu. Now whenever they do, it's going to pass in information about that item. Now what we are going to do through code is we're first going to check the ID of which item they selected. If it's red, then we're just going to make the appropriate toggle functionality for the menu itself, and then we change the background color to that appropriate color and return true, pretty much to let Android know that we took care of the event and everything is working correctly. Now the last thing I actually want to do is I just want to add a default, since this is indeed a switch statement. And by default I'm just going to return super on option item selected item. And all this does right here is it's essentially saying, okay, an option was selected, and this is just because if none of this functionality hits, then we obviously need to return something for the function so we don't get any errors or anything weird going on. So again, this is just a default functionality to make sure anything doesn't break. So now everything actually looks good. That's all we needed to do, and I got my emulator running, so let me go ahead and run this bad boy. Alright, so let's see. Red. Okay, good so far. Green. Okay, the moment of truth. Yellow. Oh, too stinking easy. It actually works. Alright, so there you go. That is the basics of how to create an overflow menu. Thank you guys for watching. Yeah, that's all I got to say. So, well, see you guys in the next video.